technical issues in New York. Why we sort those out, though, folks, you are in very good hands. Max Kellerman, Will Kane, Super Bowl champ Damian Woody in the house. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, I see you peeping my ring out, man. What's the deal?
I don't know. I mean, I try to take it easy on Stephen A. because this happens once in a while if I go too hard on him the day before.
He flaking again?
Yeah. It's like, sparring gets a little rough in the gym. You got to keep your eye on who shows up the next day.
Right.
So, hopefully we'll get him to a studio.
Max isn't used to seeing championship credentials sitting across.
That is very true. That is true.
Listening,
Wait a minute. Was that a shot at Marcellus Wiley? Who are you talking about?
It wasn't a shot at Marcellus.
Okay, good.
It wasn't a shot at me either because I bring championship credentials when it comes to this arena.
Okay.
All right, gentlemen, you know what time of the show it is. Time to keep up with the Joneses. Courtesy of 105.3 The Fan, Jerry Jones. Could Tony Romo play in a game down the stretch?
I want to do what gives us the best chance to have Tony contribute to a championship. I do want Tony to be ready to go in case that Dak should have an issue health-wise. And that gives us strength going into the playoffs. So not from the standpoint of necessarily protecting Dak, but from the standpoint of having Tony the readiest to come in and play.
Max.
Yep.
Dak, number one in Pro Bowl voting, best QBR in the league. Do you have a problem with him still talking about Tony Romo?
I actually do. And this is something I predicted was going to happen. I think they've handled it very well until now. And I predicted this was going to happen weeks ago. In fact, if not in theory, that if they have a big enough lead, Tony Romo gets some snaps. Why not? You rest some guys, you give your backup quarterback some snaps, you get him ready. But there's a bigger thing going on here, I think, if you listen to the way Jerry Jones phrases it. He wants Tony Romo to contribute to a championship. Now, I understand, guys, and you know better than anyone sitting here, a rookie quarterback doesn't win the Super Bowl. Never happened, right? Ain't going to happen. No, but eventually it's going to happen. And when you look at Dak Prescott and this Cowboys team, this looks like a pretty good candidate for it happening. And Dak hasn't missed a game. He's been healthy, and he's leading, and he has the best QBR in the league and the best offensive line. So, yeah, they have a big lead in the division, and the Giants lost JPP just now, by the way, for the season. So it looks like they'll have games to rest certain guys and to get Tony Romo some snaps. But if you're the Dallas Cowboys right now, maybe it's better to not have Dak kind of question his confidence or faith in the organization in any way. Maybe what outweighs getting Tony Romo ready in case is keeping Dak where he is, which right now is on top of the world. And there's good reason to believe they can win it all right now with Dak Prescott. I think that issue, optimizing that, takes precedent over everything else.
Well, I know for me, I'm getting tired of hearing Jerry Jones putting Tony Romo front and center. That's my whole problem with this whole thing. You're on a roll. You have, a 10, 11 game winning streak going on. This should be all about the team. I understand the premise of where he's coming from as far as getting Tony Romo back integrated into the offense. Remember, he hasn't played in over a year. So just in case something were to happen to Dak Prescott, it would be nice to have Tony Romo take some snaps. Now, the only way that will happen is when the Cowboys lock things up and get a first-round bye. Then that's when you treat this whole thing like a third preseason game where you game plan, starters go out there, and then you start subbing guys, at some point in the game. Probably somewhere around the Philadelphia Eagles because that's their last game of the regular season. But I just don't like the whole mindset of you're speaking on one player, one player, Tony Romo. The team has performed thus far to this point thus far. The team is 11-1. Why does everything have to be about Tony Romo? We want to win it for Tony Romo. No, too many people are vested in this whole season for you to keep pointing out one guy all the time.
Well, I mean, he is one of the top 3 quarterbacks in franchise history. He does own NFL and franchise records. He might be a guy that deserves a little bit of attention here and there, but it seems to me you two guys basically agree with Jerry Jones' premise that it would be smart at some point to get Tony Romo some game action. He hasn't played a full, a year. He hasn't played at all game action in 2 years, so he's really put in some serious time. So if he's your backup, And make no mistake, the best backup in the NFL. If he's your backup, it might be good to get him a little game action should something happen to Dak, should he have to step into the playoffs. Both of you seem to agree with that premise that it's wise to get Tony Romo integrated in. But your problem, as far as I'm hearing you, is that Jerry Jones is talking about it. That he's talking about Tony Romo. That he might, and according to you, Max, what I think I'm hearing you say is deem Dak's, confidence? That the organization might be undercutting Dak? See, that's the flaw in your logic. Everything you said was right until you got to that great leap. And
everything you said was right until you said anything after everything I said was right. But go ahead.
Well, then we found our divide. Let's hone in on that. It's that you think the words of Jerry Jones can somehow undercut the confidence of Dak Prescott. And there's been absolutely zero evidence. See, Max, you may hearken back, and you may get Damien to back you up here, that this is the way it works in professional sports, and confidence is a fragile thing. We've only ever seen one quarterback start at a time. You may do all that, but you don't know anything about Dak Prescott. You don't know about his confidence. You don't know about the chemistry in that team. You don't know about his relationship with Jerry Jones.
Furthermore,
in fact, and the evidence would all suggest that this team has unprecedented chemistry. They're going out, socializing together. They're supporting each other. Tony Romo and Dak Prescott individually seem to have a great relationship. I don't see anything that suggests Dak Prescott is questioning himself in the context of this organization.
Jerry Jones was asked a direct question about Tony Romo. And had he answered it differently, I wouldn't have a problem with what you're saying, nor with what he said. But if you listen carefully to what he said, he's interested. And this is what I think people are honing in on. He's interested in Tony Romo contributing to this championship. Not that Tony Romo got this organization to a certain place, or Tony Romo is the best backup quarterback in football, which obviously he is right now. Second best quarterback on the team at the moment, but the best backup.
Second best in the NFC East.
But touche, but that's wrong. But the point is, he didn't say any of that stuff. He said he's interested in having Tony Romo contribute to the championship, the eventual hopeful championship. Not let's keep him sharp in case. And that speaks to a kind of obsession of Jerry Jones with having Tony, with not simply winning a championship, but winning it with that guy.
Yeah, he doesn't want them to win a ring and then have Tony be able to say, people say, oh, Tony Romo, yeah, he was on that team, but he didn't do anything. So he wants him to have a little piece of it, so he's a part of it. He's earning the ring as well.
But my whole thing is people bring something to the table in different ways. It might not be Tony Romo playing and winning games. You could do things behind the scenes, in the meeting room, helping Dak Prescott prepare for these games. There are certainly more ways to help contribute to a win.
Public will knock
No, a lot of this, all
this wasn't out there.
No, all of this has to do with Jerry Jones and Tony Romo relationship. And I think as a player, the thing that I hated as a player is when a quarterback is viewed above everyone else. And that's the problem I have with Jerry Jones is you keep propping this man up. And I think what's unique about the Cowboys is when I think of the Cowboys, I think of Dak Prescott just one of the guys. He's just one of the guys, and everyone, they just have this unique chemistry. But every time Jerry Jones speaks, it's like he just keeps propping up Tony Romo above the team.
And the other thing is, just generally speaking, I like Tony Romo. I have a high opinion of him. But you are kind of lionizing him out of proportion to his actual accomplishments.
No, I'm not.
He has never been Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. He's never been on that level.
None of which of arguments I've made.
Nor has he ever won multiple Super Bowls or even a Super Bowl like Eli Manning or even a guy like Joe Flacco. He hasn't done any of those things. He's rarely won a playoff game, too, in his career.
Just to be clear,
and you're treating him as though he is in a separate category than the one he's actually in.
You're walking through a field of straw men with a torch. I never said he was Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers, that he won Super Bowls. I said other things, like he holds NFL records, he holds franchise records, he's the third best quarterback in franchise history. Those are things I said that stand unrebutted. By the way, just to be clear, I don't think Jerry Jones is saying, let's get Tony Romo a few snaps in week 17 so he can contribute to this championship. I don't think he thinks a few, maybe even a half in week 16 is really what he's talking about. I think he's talking about having him ready should something happen in the playoffs, and that would be the contribution that matters.
Yeah, I agree. And he's sowing those seeds that something will happen in the playoffs.
He wants him to be a part of that chip. But let's keep the combo going with Jerry and your team, Will, America's team. Jerry, how do you feel about resting players down the stretch?
No, I see us more as business as usual. What it does allow you to do is when you've got guys on the fence with injury, not push them. But the other part of that is the obvious. You don't want to take the edge off. A football game is a part of a personality of the team, and you want that team to stay very physical as you enter these playoffs.
Max?
I mean, the issue in football is usually the team that starts is not the team that finishes. They change over time, due oftentimes to injury, but also chemistry, development of younger players, the older players, holding on through the attrition of the season and all of this. The Cowboys, though, have seemed to escape that this year. They've been the best team pretty much wire to wire, pretty much, not literally, but almost. And so I would say, while you have to balance the idea that some guys probably need rest and you want to do the right thing there, I think back to the Giants in 2007. This is Super Bowl talk, so I know it's been a while for you. But
it's been more often, but maybe it's been a while.
Giants in 2007 had a playoff spot sewn up. They were going to be the wild card. And the Patriots had an undefeated season going. They were the greatest team of all time in any American team sport, according to just about everybody. And Tom Coughlin said, I'm playing all these guys. I was like, you're crazy. Rest them, including me. I'm on New York radio going, what are you kidding? Rest the guys. He goes, nope, we got to ride this into the playoffs. And they lost a close game to the Patriots and then went through the playoffs on the road, beating teams like Brett Favre at Green Bay, and then beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And most people who follow that season point to that last game of the season. Now, the Cowboys aren't a wild card team. They don't need to catch lightning in a bottle. They got it already. But I would suggest be very careful about how they handle the end of this season. I would say just keep doing what you've been doing. It's been working the whole time.
Yeah, and here's the biggest difference is the Cowboys, if they continue on the streak, they'll have a bye week. So what's the point in resting your players if you're already going to have a built-in bye week where you're not playing in the wild card round? As you said, Max, the Cowboys have chemistry. They're pretty healthy. You always got to have a little luck. Why mess any of that up by, let's hold back guys and disrupt all that chemistry. I go back to the Green Bay Packers in 2011. They won 50. They were 15-1. The last game of the year, they played the Detroit Lions. They subbed out a lot of guys. Came back in the divisional round and lost to who? Your New York Football Giants in the divisional round. So when it comes to
they won the Super Bowl that year too, by the way, Will. That's a different Giants Super Bowl.
Am I hurting you right now?
Well, no. Do we need to count them up? If we're gonna play this game, we can count them up.
In the last 20 years, go ahead.
Let's just count them up.
No, but so for me, I'm absolutely not. I'm totally opposed to sitting your guys and so on and so forth. Momentum is key when it comes to the postseason. Get in hot so you can ride it out.
I really do defer to the guy with the championship ring on.
I know,
this
I do.
kind of
It looks nice.
I believe in momentum. The data analyst guy over here probably thinks it's a myth, a creation of small minds like ours. But I believe in momentum. When you got something good, you keep it going. That being said, it seems like there are certain positions where the risk of injury is higher, where you could rest. I'm specifically talking about Ezekiel Elliott. Alfred Morris is a quality running back. He's nowhere on the level of Ezekiel Elliott. But as the season progresses, I'm not talking about sitting out entire games, but maybe another series or two per game where you're resting his legs. He's never played this many games before his entire career. He's fresh out of college playing 10, 12 games a year. Now he's looking at 16 plus a playoffs. It would seem to me, and this is where I'm actually disagreeing with Jerry Jones, there are players at positions where it might be advantageous as the season winds down towards the very end, where a couple extra series of game of rest would not only give Ezekiel Elliott fresher legs, it would give Alfred Morris, much like the Tony Romo conversation we just had, a little more warm-up going into the playoffs. Should he be called on, should something bad happen? Is that not something you think could be advantageous?
It could, but listen, you're talking about a rookie running back here. He should have fresh legs for the next few years. To me, that makes absolutely no sense.
And they're not touching him. He's getting through the line. He's not even getting contact for like 3 yards past the line of scrimmage. I mean, listen, the thing about Ezekiel Elliott, he's had a lot of touches, but he's had nowhere near like the all-time amount of touches that running backs have had in the National Football League. He's young. He can withstand this. There's no rookie wall. The only time the rookie wall comes about is when teams are losing. Then it's not only rookies, but it's veterans as well that start laying it down. So
Ride Ezekiel Elliott
Keep
out.
doing what you're doing. Look, the sample size is data analyst guy. The sample sizes are tiny in football. Tiny. That's why people don't. Anyone who tells you that they're sure about something in the NFL as though it's the NBA or Major League Baseball are lying to you. There aren't enough events that have occurred that you can really say for sure that's what happened. I talk about the Giants in 07. You talk about the Packers in 11. Both Giants Super Bowl years, by the way. And where one team doesn't rest their guys and goes on to success, another team does rest their guys and it hurts them. It doesn't mean that every time that happens. It's perfectly reasonable to say, look, Dallas can rest a few guys and still might win the Super Bowl. But when you look at examples, boy, it sure seems to me that when you got something good in the NFL, particularly late in the year, look, what was the fear of Dallas fans? Were I a Dallas fan most of this year, I'd be like, just don't let this be the peak. Let us peak at the right time. You got to ride this.
Troy Aikman, Hall of Fame quarterback, won 3 Super Bowls, by the way, with the Dallas Cowboys. He used to say, you don't just flip a switch at the end of the season. You don't go from a 3-game losing streak, limping into the playoffs, and start playing well. You don't flip switches. So I agree with you ultimately. You don't want to see a team shut down to a cold start right before you go in the playoffs. By the way, it's not just football. Sports where there's greater sample sizes, like basketball. We've seen the same thing, that you sit guys to 3 games going into your first series, and then you underperform in the first series. So I'm with you. I don't want to see a team drive it down into first gear before you got to be in 5th gear in the playoffs. I just think there are a couple positions where you don't sit the entire game. You don't sit even a half. But maybe instead of taking 2 series off a game, you take 3, 4. And those positions, like Ezekiel Elliott's, could benefit come playoff time. Not just from a more ready backup, but from more fresh legs.
Fair enough. But first, we have the Giants on Sunday Night Football with no JPP, not looking good, Max. But that's another story. We'll get into that later.
And 10 days rest for Dallas.
Right? So unfair. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We appreciate you. Coming up after the break, Stephen A. will join us. There he is, my man. How are we feeling? He's ready to talk about the King at the Mecca tonight. Him and Max will both be at that game. And if you thought there was more to the Cam being bench story, well, your hunch was right. The guys will react to it later in the show. Stay with us.
First Take is brought to you by Ace, the helpful place.
I try to take it easy on Stephen A. because this happens once in a while if I go too hard on him the day before.
He flaking again?
Yeah. It's like, sparring gets a little rough in the gym. You got to keep your eye on who shows up the next day.
Right.
So, hopefully we'll get him to a studio.
Way to spin that.
Max isn't used to seeing championship credentials sitting across.
That
I said you're going to pay for that, Max Kellerman. Stephen A., technical issues over. How are we doing?
Yeah, them technical issues. I can't wait till I see somebody up at ESPN about those technical issues. I'll tell you that much. But we'll talk about that another day. What I will say to you is this. I heard Max and Will getting at me. First of all, Will is lucky he's even allowed in the arena. So let's just move him out of the way, okay? And as it pertains to Max, I have beat you up so bad, so often. You've tried new looks. More hair on your face one week, less hair the next, a crew cut one week, another full hairdo another. You can't make up your mind how you look because of what I've been doing to you. So you got a lot of nerves.
When I hear you talk like that, I think that the reason you missed the first segment is concussion protocol.
Oh.
Do we have one at ESPN?
Yeah, right, yeah. So let me tell you, one of them technicians is going to have a concussion by the time I get through it. But that's a story for another day. Let's move on.
Settle down. You guys are both going to be in the same arena tonight. That would be the Garden. So let's discuss. King James will get to see the Zen Master in person after Phil Jackson made disparaging comments toward LeBron's business associates, calling them his posse. And Phil, he's not backing down. Lisa Leslie asked Jackson if he'd like to take back what he said about LeBron James on CBS Sports Network. Here's what he said. I violated one of those tenets of our thing, and the obvious thing is the word itself carries connotation, and I just don't understand that part of it, the word. So I guess word choice could be something I could regret. But yeah, talking about other teams' players, that's out of the box. Leslie then asked Jackson if he wanted to meet with James and clear things up. No, it's water under the bridge. I don't think there was anybody hurt or harmed in this situation. I think LeBron's friend obviously had an issue with it, so we just let it go. It's not enough to talk about it. Stephen A., you think LeBron should forgive Phil?
Well, first of all, I think that anybody, I think that the world is full of second chances. I mean, that's what America's supposed to be about. And I definitely think that it's something that LeBron James should forgive him for. That doesn't mean you have to talk about it. That doesn't mean that you have to sit down and have dinner together or sing Kumbaya to one another. Make no mistake about it. But at the same time, I mean, listen, he's a human being and everybody's entitled to make mistakes, make errors in judgment, and go from there. I do think it's important to highlight this point, Max. And I was talking to my man, Brandon Tierney. He and I go back a long ways. You remember my brother
BT,
right there, Max.
yeah, of course.
And yeah, that's right, the one and only BT. And we were talking about this yesterday because obviously it was something that, he, along with a lot of white individuals who happen to be friends of mine and I know very well, they felt like LeBron James basically took, and him and his crew essentially took just a harmless mistake and just elevated it to astronomical proportions. And, thinking about it from that perspective, thinking about the world that we're living in, how PC everybody believes it should become, and it has become to some degree when real issues of race come up and you turn something like this into a race-related issue, it's something that they find incredibly offensive. And I think that that's something that I owe it to them and many, many others, particularly my white contemporaries, to point out that that's a valid argument if you were making it about anybody else. Certainly when it came to Phil Jackson, you're not making the argument that Phil Jackson is racist or in any way. Phil Jackson's history, his left liberal leaning, mentality to some degree, his actions throughout decades clearly show that there's nothing about racist or racism that should have anything to do with Phil Jackson. The problem, however, is that Phil Jackson is a cerebral individual. He's very, very slick with his words and his verbiage, and he usually knows what he's doing. So it's hard to believe that he made a mistake in saying what he said. Now, it doesn't have anything to do with race, but what it did have something to do with taking those individuals that are friends of LeBron James and not recognizing who they are and what they bring to the table as intelligent, young, accomplished individuals that LeBron assisted on a come up, and basically reducing them to an entourage or a posse or anything like that. You're sort of quelling or diminishing or dissipating their level of accomplishment. And you're basically associating with them with street individuals who are where they are just because LeBron James is their friend. And that's why they took it the way that they took it. And that's not racist or racism, but at the same time, it's something that Phil Jackson should have known better than, because he deals with enough African Americans. He understands enough about them to know how that would have been interpreted, and he was wrong to do so.
Well, Stephen A., as you were describing it, you said his crew. I think Phil Jackson originally was just using posse with crew interchangeably, and he's outdated or wasn't sensitive enough to it, and LeBron pointed it out. And okay, that could be a teaching moment about assumptions that people make about groups of people, etc. Or even maybe about being extra sensitive toward groups of people based on various things. But I want to get a little bit more into what I think is really going on here, and I don't think it's about race.
Sure.
Phil Jackson.
Neither do I.
People talk about, the Eastern philosophy of it all with Phil Jackson. And this is very Sun Tzu of him. Undermine everything that is good in the land of your enemy, right? That's always been Phil Jackson. He tries to undermine everything that's good in the land of his enemy. So that in 2011, when he thought his Lakers might make it to the finals again, they've been to 3 straight, and he knew what the rising power was in Miami with LeBron James and the Heat and the Big Three. And Spoelstra came out and said that when there was talk about maybe Pat Riley replacing him as coach, there were guys crying in the locker room. Phil Jackson said, this is the NBA, no boys allowed. He was saying he was throwing shade at the team that he thought he would have to undermine. And who's that team now? If you're any team competing in the NBA, particularly in the East, that's LeBron James. It's really wherever LeBron James is. He was in Miami. Now it's Cleveland, the defending champions. And so Phil was throwing shade. And generally what happens when he does that is all the stuff that splatters is left for the person to whom he threw the shade They have to deal with it, not Phil. LeBron James here is showing how mature he is. He's like the final stage of Jedi Master, or like Bruce Leroy in The Last Dragon, and Phil Jackson is Shonuff, and now LeBron's got that glow because LeBron puts up a mirror just to flex. It says, oh, posse, that's an interesting word. That's an interesting choice. Why did he say that? And now it's all back on Phil, and Phil's got to deal with it. So why should LeBron forgive him? LeBron's like, no, I'm done with it. It's good. You can deal with Phil Jackson about it. He out-Phil Jacksoned Phil Jackson. That's amazing.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think that I don't think you're looking at it correctly, if I may say so. I think there's a couple of things that you need to take into consideration. And let me put on my insider hat here, Max, just to be fair. Let's understand that Phil, with that little soliloquy with the posse word, implemented the whole thing about LeBron James supposedly, the team, not being ready to go, and Eric Spoelstra calling Pat Riley, and, what is there to do here? Phil gave the impression that there was some inside information that he was letting out there about LeBron James essentially coming across as a prima donna and forcing Eric Spoelstra to take a position, bringing up Pat Riley, and then inserting his boys into the equation. And when you do that, coupled with what you were saying about LeBron, you're essentially giving the impression, typical young dude in the NBA with his quote-unquote posse, this is how they act, this is what they require. Now, that doesn't mean that Phil Jackson said anything because they were black. But Phil Jackson was saying something about a culture. He was saying something about his perception of that culture. He was giving an indication of what individuals like himself and the Pat Rileys of the world have to deal with. And LeBron James was challenging the accuracy of it, as well as Maverick and Rich Paul and those guys.
Because LeBron James is an exception to the rule in almost every way. He's amazing. And even his organization, he's a CEO. Even his organization is amazing when you consider there are guys from high school, from his high school team, who aren't just hangers-on, obviously. They're key pieces in his business, and they have done extraordinary things in business. That's not the story of many or even most or even, it's very few. And so LeBron is the exception. Phil Jackson generalizes there, and LeBron's saying, time out. That's not me. I don't know who you're generalizing about. I also don't think that's about race, though it could be interpreted that way. But how it certainly can be interpreted under the umbrella of Phil throwing shade, undermining the other, right? He points, where's the threat? It's them, they're the dominant team. I'm going to just undermine them, undermine everything that is good in the land of your enemy. And LeBron James deflected it and did it back to Phil better than Phil did it to him, using Phil's own words to hang him.
But I got news for you. You're not hurting Phil by bringing up race, because everybody knows that racism and racists don't go with Phil Jackson. It doesn't match. You're actually letting him off the hook by bringing up race, because that's not what Phil is associated with. When you get into Phil's intent, but when you get into Phil as his intent and his agenda, which both you and I just articulated, now you're getting to the nuts and bolts of it. But racism and Phil Jackson, please.
But he's got to deal with it. LeBron's washed his hands. Now Phil's got to answer the questions. It's always the other way.
He doesn't have to do it. He doesn't have to do that.
So
not with Michael Jordan and Kobe around. He doesn't have to. And Shaq, he doesn't have to do that. Everybody knows that's not Phil.
The Cavs are at the Garden tonight. You guys will be there at 8 Eastern. And let's get to Phil's former stomping grounds. That would be the Staples Center. That's where our nightcap is. And two teams that do not like each other. Steph Curry and the Warriors first in the West, taking on Chris Paul and the Clippers for our third. Golden State has won 6 straight games against LA. And Doc Rivers knows the Clippers' window is closing.
Everybody's window is different. And the thing with our team, when you look at it as a total, we are very young, other than Chris. We've had some strange circumstances over the last 3 years, and some have been in our control. And then, the other thing is you have a nucleus, and then you start seeing what you can put around that group to maybe change that window and make the window bigger. So we are always evaluating that. I think this team has life, and I think we're going to play it up.
All right, the window's closing. Stephen A., what do you need to see from the Clippers tonight?
Well, I like to see them win. I mean, the fact of the matter is that the Golden State Warriors, we need to see somebody that we can legitimately look at, not just as a roster, but in terms of their production, and say this team can give them a run for their money. And I'm going to put the onus on the Clippers more so than the San Antonio Spurs, the Oklahoma City Thunder, or anybody else for that matter, because there is a healthy, real, and authentic dislike that both these squads have for one another and like going up against each other due to it. And although Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry is a lethal weapon 3 if ever there was one, Blake Griffin, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Jordan are nothing to sneeze at. They're Lob City. Take away DeAndre Jordan's free throw shooting, and this team is incredibly formidable. Then when you got my man Jay Boogie, Jamal Crawford, you know, Mr. and one himself that I call, you got Raymond Felton coming off the bench, you got Maurice Spates, who was in Golden State, he's now with the LA Clippers. You see some of the bodies that they've added to add depth to their roster. You've got Austin Rivers, who I like as well. You look at all of these guys, they have the pieces to compete with Golden State. Now, I don't think they're better than Golden State, but you know how it is. When competition is stiff, Max, and you want somebody so badly, and that adrenaline is elevated and what have you, then all of a sudden it raises the stakes, because the greatness in you, if you got it, comes out, and you respond to the challenge. We see Chris Paul and what he could do, but I'm here to tell you there's an elevated level of play that I've seen on many occasions whenever Chris Paul is going up against Steph Curry, because Steph Curry gonna get his, but Chris Paul refuses to get squashed and annihilated and embarrassed. I need to see the same thing from Blake Griffin. I need to see the same thing from DeAndre Jordan and Jamal Crawford and the rest of the crew. It is time. And if you're going to lose, go down swinging. That's the kind of thing that we need to see from the Clippers when they're going up against the Golden State Warriors in order for them to take us to take them seriously.
We were asked before the season started, what's the team best suited to upset the apple cart in the NBA, the eventual finals that we all know is coming barring catastrophic injury between the Cavs and the Warriors. I picked the Clippers, but I don't actually think the Clippers are going to beat the Warriors. It's kind of like me here at ESPN, Stephen A. Everyone knows that no one can beat me in a debate, but who has the best shot? Okay, I guess Stephen A. Smith. If everything goes right, maybe he can get a debate from Max Kellerman. But you know it's not really going to happen, but maybe he has the best shot.
We're actually waiting for you to actually debate and show up for it. So when you do, let me know. Go ahead.
The question is, what are you looking for from the Clippers tonight? And the answer for me is defensive communication. That's what you're looking for. For them to have any chance against the Warriors in the eventual Western Conference Finals, should it be them and the Warriors and not the Spurs, which is very possible, and the Warriors, you have to have crazy good defensive communication. What the Warriors do better than anybody is figure out in the flow of the offense, in the flow of the game, who's hot. They figure that out early, and they feed him. See Klay Thompson the other night, right? So you need crazy good defensive communication, and you need to pick up the ball handler, Steph Curry, early. He has infinite range. It spaces the floor extra. Not all spacing is created equal. And ideally, you'd like Klay Thompson to not be the guy he was the other night. You want him to be a guy who has to put the ball on the floor and make decisions driving to the basket, which he can do, but not like Steph Curry, obviously. And it makes Klay Thompson lesser than he was the other night. He took like 11 dribbles the other night, I think the stat was. Who was it? I think it was Haberstroh who came up with that stat, 11 dribbles for 60 points, something crazy like that. Klay can't be that. So the Clippers have to communicate defensively, loudly, early, and well to have a shot. If they can start demonstrating that they can do that this early in the season, maybe it's an indication that at some point they could actually compete with the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. That's what I'm looking for tonight.
Well, listen, the bottom line is this. Blake Griffin is a star. We won't dispute that. I need him to be a superstar. Kevin Durant is a superstar. Steph Curry's a superstar. Klay Thompson, as far as I'm concerned, is a superstar because of his shooting ability. Let me tell you something right now. you can offset that by attacking with veracity and making sure that Golden State's front line has to contend with you. Blake Griffin was once upon a time box office. Some would say he is still box office. He's a Skywalker. Where is that dude? I know he can play. I'm not asking him to do something
I think he's having a great
do.
season,
I'm
Stephen
saying
A.
you have to recognize. I'm talking about the Warriors. I'm not talking about the season. I'm talking about against the Warriors. I need him to be that dude because DeAndre Jordan and Chris Paul, they can't do it without Blake Griffin against the Warriors. You're going to win. You're going to even make a series competitive against the Warriors. You want to send a message to the basketball world that this is a team that can legitimately be a threat to the Golden State Warriors in the Western Conference. Blake Griffin has to be a superstar, period.
All right, we got a great slate here on ESPN. It's going to be fun, and you two have fun at the game tonight. But you know what else is fun, Stephen A? Timid time! Tim Tebow is going to get his shot to play with the major leaguers. But does he deserve it? Someone at the desk has a major problem with it. Plus, Dak and Zeke are on a roll on and off the field, but the guys have an issue with the quote-unquote off-the-field celebrations. We get into it. Tim Tebow's baseball career is apparently far from over. Tebow's 19-game stint in the Arizona Fall League resulted in mixed reviews from Major League scouts and officials, but New York Mets manager Terry Collins spoke highly of Tebow and was adamant he come to Major League camp. I certainly hope we'll see Tim Tebow in some of our games. If he's not in our camp, I will get him over. Stephen A. Should this be a consideration?
Hell no. I mean, this is... Let me be composed.
Breathe.
Tim Tebow's my friend. I wish him nothing but the best. I do not root against Tim Tebow. Mm-hmm. Let me be very clear about that. But he was 12 of 62 in the minors. That's a 194 batting average with 2 RBIs? What has he done to earn a trip to spring training, Major League Baseball? You've got to be kidding me. Now, if you're talking about the minors on the same level he's at, okay, that's fine. You want a dog and pony show, that's fine. But what really bothers this about, and see, this is the hard part because it looks like I'm getting on Tim Tebow, and I'm really not. I'm not rooting against the kid.
He's your friend. You've made
Actually,
that
not. He's my friend.
He means a lot to you.
But I joke about it. I joke about it in a sense, but he's an incredibly good guy and impossible to root against. My issue is that just the leniency accorded to this dude really drives me nuts. Do y'all have any idea? And I'm talking black, I'm talking white, I'm talking Latinos, do you have any idea how many young guys out there who play baseball far better, and who would do far better are craving for a speck of the attention that this guy continuously gets, and everybody acts like it's justified. We gotta ask ourselves something in America, whether or not we care about being a meritocracy or not. Do you care about what you actually do, or whether or not it's a popularity contest? This is baseball, this ain't football. This dude hadn't played since high school, but you got 46 different scouts and MLB personnel going to watch him work out. He goes to the minors, can't even bat 200, can't even get more than 2 RBIs, and you got a Major League Baseball manager, highly respected, because I am very fond of Terry Collins and the job that he has done with the Mets, particularly over the last 2 seasons. Last year, it was a miraculous job considering the bevy of injuries that he had, and he still got them to the postseason, at least for 1 game. And you're going to turn around and talk about a dude that clearly hasn't earned the right to be there, and you would love for him to have that opportunity? I think that's a damn shame. I really do. I think it flies in the face, and it shows a disrespect to players in the game of baseball. It does.
I brought this up months ago when you had precisely this reaction to Tebow getting any kind of shot in baseball in the first place. Brick. How's your soap opera turn going? It's going pretty good, right? You have a recurring character on a soap opera?
It's going. What did I say to that?
Well,
go ahead and make your point. I'll come back.
You know
I'll come back. Go ahead.
how many
Go ahead.
starving actors there are out there who've spent money and time and effort and energy and dreamt of getting an opportunity and have gone to acting school and classes and done all kinds of stuff and hoped at headshots and sent them out and, rustled up an agent somehow and went on cattle calls and everything. Mm-hmm. And they don't get to go on General Hospital. What was it? Guided? Which one were you? Which one are you on? You're on General Hospital.
General Hospital.
Yeah, General
Don't
Hospital,
confuse the two. Don't confuse it. It's General Hospital. It's General
my
Hospital.
grandmother's
By the way,
favorite was
I'll be
Guiding
back
Light,
on.
so that's the one
By the way,
I know.
I'll be back on. I'll be back on next month. But keep going.
Good. Yeah,
keep
you're
going.
good. I like watching you there. The point is, there you are, and you know why you're there? Because you're Stephen A. Smith, TV star, not actor, TV star. And Tim Tebow is Tim Tebow, famous athlete and a great athlete, not a baseball player. And for you to get bent so like his celebrity in a kind of related field has led to additional opportunity as it has for you. And it has taken away, in some theoretical way, I guess, opportunity from someone else. But what makes you so upset about the opportunity? Let's think about this.
Stop asking rhetorical questions.
Why?
If you're gonna ask me a question, let me answer it. I'm saying let me answer it. Let me answer it. But go ahead.
No, Brick, go ahead.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I love that name, by the way. I love the
good
fact
one.
that they gave me a name. Keep in mind.
Did you get that playing basketball? Or is that, okay, go ahead.
Brick. Oh, no. Yeah, you can say what you want. Go check the resume, brother. And by the way, I'll smoke you anytime on the basketball court.
For sure.
Your back will be hurting. Trust me on that.
For sure.
All right, let's be clear. Brick is a recurring role that was created for me. I took no one's job. That's number one. Number two, I'm on television every day. Number three, partly acting, because sometimes I have to act like there's a competition here and act like you actually beat me at the debate. When in fact that never happens, okay? So I've been acting for quite a long time. All right, number four.
You got
okay,
four.
look at
I
the
didn't even ask
dichotomy
four
that
questions.
exists between NFL, and MLB. It's two totally different worlds,
Yes.
Max. You
Yes.
can't compare
like
the two.
sports talk and acting are two totally different worlds, but they both fall under
That's not necessarily true.
No.
I would know. I would know. That's not necessarily
Football and
true.
baseball
I
are
would know
as
that.
related at least as sports talk and acting. But okay, let's table that for a second. What makes you really so
Thank
upset
you.
about the opportunity when you really think about it? Is there any shot that Tebow makes the majors? No. Is he because he's inspirational to people and he gets additional opportunity, he's gonna learn to hit the curveball? No. But let's say he does. Let's say all the additional opportunity afforded Tim Tebow because he is inspirational to so many, all those extra reps actually do help him hit the curveball, and therefore he does stick on a team. He gets good enough because of this kind of unfair, in your view, extra opportunity afforded by his celebrity. He gets good enough that he actually does stick. And if someone else would have had that opportunity, they would have stuck, so that's not fair either. I would say, if you've actually done enough with the opportunity, even if it's extra afforded you, that you actually transform yourself into something better and you go get it, good for you. But it ain't gonna happen, and we know it. So what are you upset about?
That's not fair. And the reason that's not fair is because that implies that essentially I want Tim Tebow to fail. That's not where I'm going with this. This has nothing to do with Tim Tebow in terms of his own individual pursuit of his dream. I respect it and I admire him for it. My issue is that you're making, not you, but they're saying these things about Tim Tebow for one reason and one reason only. They like him. And that's so subjective. And that's so arbitrary. But more importantly, it is not something that's accorded to most people in our population.
Right.
I got a real problem with that. There should be some level of merit to it all. I had no problem with him being given a chance in Denver, and then being given a chance with the New York Jets, and him being given a chance with the New England Patriots. That's right up his alley.
But to
not play baseball since high school,
but you
and to
already
be
said,
given
that's
that
not true
opportunity
anymore. Now
Come
he has.
on, man, that ain't right, man.
Now he has, and he's
That's
trying to
not right.
parlay that opportunity into another one, and okay, that's how it works.
But it's
in
the
the
same
real
principle
world.
for me. It's the same principle for me. 46 guys. You know what? And you know what some of these young talents out here, millions, Max, 46 MLB personnel members come to watch you.
Make the team
That's
anyway.
a bag.
He's taking the spot of the last guy on the roster. But you said something interesting before. You said because of the respect and admiration you have for Tim Tebow. Many, many people have a lot of respect and admiration for him because he does not allow the reality of the world to interfere with his dreams. And while that's not literally how everyone should behave, it is an inspiration to many. And so teams want to bring him in probably for two reasons, neither of which have to do with actual athletic competition. He ain't going to make the team. But one, because they're cynical and they want to capitalize on it, financially, commercially. And two, because he will serve as an inspiration, they hope, to minor leaguers, that he will make them feel big about themselves. And I don't have a problem with either thing.
Professional personnel individuals in professional sports leagues, I believe, have an elevated obligation to reward folks on merit as opposed to popularity contests, because I believe sports to be the closest thing to a meritocracy that we have in this country. If you get to a point where it's about who you like and who's ingratiated themselves enough and who's likable, as opposed to what they actually do with their performance, man, you're going to have a vast segment of this population that'll never have a chance.
If we're talking about being on a postseason roster in the major leagues, fine. But if we're talking about a minor league
spring training is a big deal, Max.
The last guy on the roster, come on.
Spring training is a big deal to a lot of guys.
None of them are very good, or they'd be on the roster, Max. Right? I mean, none of them are the stars, or they'd already be on the roster.
You never know, Max. You never know.
All right.
You never know.
Tim Tebow getting awarded. We have another big name being punished. Coming up after the break, we said this one smells. There's more to the story of the benching of Cam Newton, not just the dress code. We will explain and react after the break. So we debuted a new segment this week, and it is called Final Take, where the guys get a chance to speak their mind uninterrupted, let loose on a topic of their choosing. Stephen A., what you got for us today?
Well, usually I write a column and I look at the viewers and I do my essay right on the air. This will be off the cuff. I think for years there have been things that have been misunderstood about me, the Dallas Cowboys, and their fans. I'm going to put that all to rest at the end of today's show and really get very, very personal about where the residue of my disgust with Cowboy Nation actually comes from. I'm going to open my heart and I'm going to reveal the truth finally after 30 years.
I'm a little nervous. You're off the cuff on this subject. So everyone, please make sure to stick around for Final Take at the end of the show. It's going to be good.
I can't wait until the day the Cowboys sign Tim Tebow. That would really be a perfect storm for Stephen A.
I think that ship sailed. It'd be the Yankees at this point. That would get him going. But you have a perfect segue for me, Stephen A. Let's get into our next subject here. 3 days after Cam Newton was benched by Ron Rivera for a dress code violation, there are conflicting reports on why Newton was punished. Barstool Sports is reporting he was benched for being at a club past curfew in between games on the West Coast and not for failing to wear a tie on game day. And then you mentioned the Cowboys. On Monday night, Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott celebrated the Cowboys' 11-1 start, popping some champagne in the club in Dallas. So I want to start with you, Stephen A. here. Is it okay for athletes to be in clubs?
Max, Molly, this is the most difficult question that I've ever had to answer because Max, my man who used to sit in that chair, my brother from another mother, Skip, once made me laugh so hard they almost had to call the paramedics because I was laughing so hard because he actually said that professional athletes should literally have a curfew and shouldn't be out after 11 o'clock at night, which I thought was the most ridiculous statement that I've ever heard. He always said that. Here's my thing. I'm not so sure I disagree that much in this day and age. Now, I'm not about to sit up there and go that far and talk about curfews and things of that nature for grown men who know what their responsibilities are. But I will concede that times have truly changed. that the world that we live in, with everybody having cameras on their cell phones, with Twitter and the advent of other social media outlets, and how perception can become reality even when there's no truth attached to it whatsoever, and the damage that it can do to a lot of these guys, I would never say, don't go out. I would never say you should have a curfew, and as a grown man, you should be prohibited from hanging if that's what you choose to do, so long as it's not in violation of any team rules. But what I will say is that I believe the time has arrived where the world is so wide open. I do find myself, even me personally, asking, is it truly, truly worth it? Max, I'm at a point, man, I'll go out to dinner. You know, I'll take my girl, you know, we go out, we'll do whatever, you know, jazz club or something. But I gotta confess to you, man, ain't no desire to go out no more because it just doesn't appear to be worth it. And I'm a grown man who has a 2-drink maximum, has never been in any kind of trouble, and ain't about to get in any kind of trouble, okay, from a legal variety, that is. Legal, I'm talking about legal issues, that's what I'm talking about. I ain't gonna get in no trouble like that. My point is that it just ain't worth it. And I do think it's come a time where these guys got to start looking at it and asking themselves just that.
Listen, I'm old enough to have been in the transition from pre-social media to social media era. As someone who was on TV and had some disposable income as a young man, and I can tell you my experience of it is precisely as you described, that it's more dangerous even just to go out just on the optics alone, the way it looks, because everyone has recording devices. And if you're recorded in a moment that is even taken out of context, looks bad, it can be very bad. What social media has done, and camera phones, it's taken backroom issues and behavior. Behavior, we've always had culturally an understanding, at least implicitly, that the way we behave in public is not always the way we behave in private. And social media and camera phones has taken that kind of private backroom behavior and brought it to the front room. And there's this insistence somehow now that those two things have to align more closely, or you're being hypocritical or you're really behaving bad. I would say in the case of athletes going to clubs, that's a major consideration. You're right. They should weigh whether it's worth it or not. I would also say that a lot of the athletes that people think are choir boys, including some of the quarterbacks with big endorsement deals throughout even recent history, go out and party like everybody else. But here are the two things you have to do if you're going to do that. One, don't get caught, which is very, very difficult. I mean, if you go out a lot, eventually you would assume you will. And by caught, I don't mean necessarily doing anything bad, just out of context where it looks bad. And two, win. Because if you're Dak Prescott, or Ezekiel Elliott, if you are Cam Newton, and you're at the club and they got pictures of you on TMZ, wherever, and you're winning, hey, that's fine. But if you're in the middle of a bad season or you blow it in the big moment, you will be blamed for that. So athletes just need to go in with their eyes open. Try to be careful in terms of your own image and win.
Stephen A., can I add something here really quick? Because we have to be real. People are going to go out, right? People need to let their hair down after a big win. You want to celebrate. People need to enjoy life as well. My former colleague, Terrell Davis, used to always say, from NFL Network, he used to always say, bring the party to you. These guys have huge houses. Bring everybody over. Going. And there's one other thing I want to add, because I know you both respect Derek Jeter so much. Pull a Jeter. Leave the phones at the door. Or wait till after you retire to get married, start your family. I'm just saying.
Not everyone has those kind of resources, Molly. A place big enough and the wherewithal and the cachet to get the whole party to them and then have everyone have their cell phones confiscated.
You can be more private.
Hold on.
Yes.
I mean, this is one of the areas where I would consider myself an expert on this. Number one, if you can afford it, have the party at your crib.
Yes.
Number two, it's not just social media. It's not just camera cell phones. It's also TMZ, who's a formidable, entity in terms of what we're discussing. I mean, my Lord, I come off the plane and they're waiting for me sometimes. I mean, it's unbelievable. So and that's me. I ain't one of these athletes. So you got that going on. Let's also take into account the fact that, excuse me, if you're going to go out, don't tell me you can't afford a car service. Yes, you can. And not only that, whether it's your boy or a crew of dudes or whatever, you've got to be insulated with individuals responsible enough and, more importantly, who love you enough to not think about themselves but think about you and care enough to make sure that you're not doing anything that would compromise you or your profession. Personally, it would be best that they don't do anything during the season. But whether it's during the season or not, the company you keep is paramount.
Of course.
It's pivotal.
There's a lot of vultures
You
out
have to
there.
have the right people
Stephen,
around
you bring up TMZ, and TMZ does a fantastic job. They will catch you slipping.
They do.
They will catch you slipping. But
no question.
Forget about TMZ. What about all the other sites and all the other entities that won't even catch you slipping? They'll just make it look like you are. I mean, it's dangerous.
They lie all the
for
time.
an
They lie
athlete.
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No question. And it's dangerous. It's not just about them. It's the other people, all the snakes that are out there trying to get them, knowing they have money as well. Moving on, gentlemen, to a much more serious subject here. There was an arrest in the death of Joe McKnight, but you don't want to miss what the sheriff had to say about the rush to judgment. We'll play that for you and react. Also, later in the show, the Raiders are off to a 10-2 start, but are they getting the respect they deserve? Someone at the desk doesn't think so. We react.
Criticize people for just asking for pause. Let the process take its course. But no, that wasn't enough. We had to make demands. We want justice now. And if we don't get it now and we don't get it our way, we're going to start saying things and doing things until we get it our way. It's not about the right thing. It's not about justice, and it's not about the process. It's about what we want and what we want now. And we don't care who we disparage in the process. This isn't about race. Not a single witness has said up to this day that there was one racial slur uttered during the course of these events. And unfortunately, a life was lost. But you want to know something, folks? 2 people engaged in bad behavior that day. Why? I don't know. But they did. And we're going to criticize everybody else for just letting the process take the course.
Tell us how you really feel. That was the sheriff with some strong comments there. His name is Newell Normand. After of course, Joe McKnight was shot and killed, the NFL player. So he fired back at the people who have criticized him for the way he's handled the Joe McKnight shooting investigation. Stephen A., I want to start with you here. What's your reaction to what you just heard?
Well, my first reaction is that to Sheriff Norman, I would love to talk to this man privately one-on-one and have a conversation with him. Because I would want him to understand that just because somebody, no one rather, uttered a racial slur or anything like that doesn't mean that it didn't have something to do with it. Joe McKnight was shot dead. He was unarmed. And as a result of that, this man who shot him was initially brought to the police station, questioned, then let go. We understand that now he has been arrested for manslaughter. We get that. But when you have people sending in emails and text messages and beyond, what they're saying is a man was gunned down in the streets in broad daylight. You have the assailant who acknowledged he shot the guy, who admitted the individual was not armed. So why is this man dead? And if you want to sit up there and say that it's not about race or whatever the case may be, that's fine. I can respect where the sheriff is coming from because he's like, we need time to gather evidence. You might need time to gather evidence in your eyes. But in the eyes of the common individual out there, an unarmed man was gunned down in broad daylight over road rage, and the assailant is there waiting for you, hands you his gun, told you he shot the dude, and you questioned him and sent him home. Now, we might have stand your ground laws and other things to take into consideration, but one would surmise, why the hell did you let him leave after questioning him? He told you he shot the dude. The dude is dead, and you let him go home. I don't give a damn if it was for an hour. What you let him go home for? What did you want him to do? Go home and cook himself dinner and chill and watch an episode of General Hospital? I mean, what the hell was that about? So when you look at it from that perspective, of course people are going to take it the wrong way. And then when you couple that with the times that we have been living in, particularly over the last few years, the protests, Black Lives Matter, black individuals getting shot down. It's not just about police brutality or the specter of police brutality. George Zimmerman, when he shot Trayvon Martin, that wasn't a cop. It wasn't a cop. There are people who Will Smith and his situation in New Orleans, if I remember correctly, it wasn't a cop who shot him. But what we're saying is other people get into situations and somehow, some way, there are arrests, there are confrontations, there are questions and all of this other stuff. But when black men get into situations, they're dead. Now, that might not be a racial issue to Sheriff Norman. I would love to have a private, off the record, off the air conversation with him to explain to him why he is wrong. Period.
Yeah, from his point of view, I understand what he means when he says this was not a racial issue and that it wasn't a hate crime. It wasn't about race, the confrontation. It was simply an issue of road rage. It's very difficult. I'd say it's impossible to completely divorce law enforcement and the issue of race, particularly in situations like this. There is someone who is dead, and it was a black man shot and killed at the hands of a white man. I would say that the history of this country has tied race to class. This is not new ground here. This has been discussed and written about for generations now, has tied race to class in a way where there are clearly second-class citizens based on race. Now, if a member of law enforcement, in this case, this man feels that that's outrageous, they're following the same procedures, etc., that they would otherwise, had the race been reversed, had it been a black man who shot and killed a white man, I would ask those listening to perform that thought experiment in your own mind. Had it been a black man who shot and killed a white man, would it take 4 days to lock him up? Especially if you knew where he was and you brought him in for questioning. And once you do that thought experiment, I think the answer becomes pretty obvious. Now, maybe there are law enforcement people who say, no, were it me, were I in charge of the case, I would treat it exactly the same way, regardless of race. But that's not the way it seems to most people, and that hasn't been the history of our country. So to stand up there and say that you can completely divorce race from an incident like this, I think is at best naive.
Well, a couple of things that I'd like to point out, Max, and I'd appreciate your input on what I'm about to say. First of all, by letting the guy go after questioning him, you've essentially allowed him to go home and get his affairs in order. Hire your lawyer, get your family together, do whatever it is that you need to do to prepare yourself for the onslaught that would come about. I am telling you, as an individual who is from the streets of New York City, who grew up with drug dealers on my block, who knows the streets, who understands it, I'm trying to tell you, that just does not happen for black people. Let me be very, very clear. I have law enforcement officials in my family. I've got 2 of my boys. One's a DEA agent, one's FBI. I got a couple of police officers that are my boys as well. And I ain't just grow up with hood rats. I grew up with hood rats that turned into something special. You understand what I'm saying? I'm telling you what they tell me. That doesn't happen for black people on most occasions. That's number one. But the other point, Max, that I would like to articulate about this to Sheriff Norman, and again, I'm disagreeing with him, but I'm not condemning him because I understand that on his side of the fence, I can hear where he's coming from, which is why I said I'd love to have a conversation with him. As it pertains to Sheriff Norman, I got a solution to some of the things that he was talking about. Can you show us incidences where road rage occurs with white people and they're getting gunned down in the streets? And oh, by the way, people are allowed to go home after questioning when they already told you they shot the person down. If we had, I'm not saying that there are not white victims. What I'm saying is that if white victims were more conspicuous and we saw that on the news and blowing up the headlines and beyond, maybe the specter of something heinous would not be overwhelming us the way that it is. But when we see deaths, I'm not talking about arrests, I'm not talking about fights, when we see fatalities in situations like this, it is black men who are dying. And that's undeniable. It's undeniable.
I would say this. You want my input on that idea. I would say you're essentially talking about the idea of white privilege. And to my point about how class is tied to race due to the history of this country and how we've created an idea that there are second-class citizens, African-American, essentially, in these incidents, equals a second-class citizen in terms of the way, in terms of treatment by law enforcement, and certainly at least in terms of the way it's perceived by many, if not most. I would say that my issue with the idea of white privilege is not to strip people, white people, of that privilege. It's to create a place where it's not a privilege, it's a human right. The human right to dignity and to be treated like a first-class citizen should extend to everyone, not be stripped from one group of people so that they are now on par with another, but that so-called privilege, which it is because it is conferred only to one group of people, is extended to everybody.
All right, but last comment. Joe Madison, Urban View Radio, Channel 126 on Sirius XM every weekday morning from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. religiously states cultural conditioning. What we're talking about here, and the media is very responsible for this, is this perception that has been disseminated for decades and beyond that somehow black men are animalistic, somehow black men are a danger, they are a problem, and they are to be mowed down. It may not be the intention of the present day media, but the actions spanning decades have culminated to a point when it comes to black men, a legitimate argument can be made that while others can talk and there can be a negotiation, black folks, black men have to be gunned down. It is undeniable when stuff like this happens. That's right, I said it for people out there that wondering just in case they thought I stuttered. It's something different going on. Cultural conditioning.
No question. And a young man was killed because of road rage. It's so, I don't even have the words of what to say here about Joe McKnight, but my heart goes out to his family, all his loved ones. And another one of these stories that we have to get into. I appreciate your words on that, Stephen A. When we come back, we're going to go back on the court, get back into sports here. If the playoffs started today, the Knicks would be in the playoffs. Do the guys have a problem with Phil saying that Carmelo is a ball hog? We'll discuss that. It's NBA Wednesday doubleheader tonight on ESPN at 8. LeBron and the Cavs taking on the Knicks, then Warriors and Clippers from the Staples Center. Coverage tips with NBA Countdown charged by Mountain Dew at 7. Speaking of which, is Carmelo a ball hog? Phil Jackson was asked about Melo in an interview with CBS Sports and says that he can play the role that Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant played in the team's triangle offense, but he believes that Anthony sometimes breaks a team rule by holding onto the ball for too long. Carmelo, a lot of times, wants to hold the ball longer than we have a rule. If you hold it past 2 seconds, you benefit the defense. He has a little bit of a tendency to hold it for 3, 4, 5 seconds, and then everybody comes to a stop. That is one of the things we work with, but he's adjusted to the triangle. He knows what he can do, and he's willing to see its success. Stephen A., you have any problems with Jackson's comments?
Well, of course I do. I have profound respect for Phil Jackson. 11 championships are 11 championships. But I don't like him very much. And I think that I need to say that. And here's why. Phil Jackson has been called many things. He's been called the Zen Master. He's been called the brilliant basketball coach, brilliant basketball mind, an ultimate champion, the best coach in basketball. But there is one thing that Phil Jackson has never been called, and it is absolutely what he is. He's a bully. No one's ever called him that. I'm going to today. Let's take into account the fact that we need to ask ourselves the question, who the hell does Phil Jackson think he is? Phil Jackson does have 11 rings. 6 of them came with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. 5 of them came with Shaq and Kobe, got 3, and then Kobe with Gasol. No one has rode the coattails of a superstar the way Phil Jackson has. Don't tell me that the Chicago Bulls don't ultimately win a championship had Doug Collins remained their basketball coach. Now, I'm not going to take anything away from the greatness of Phil Jackson because there's something to be said about, not messing up what you have, Max. The problem is, when have you heard Phil step back and exude and display humility in talking about how lucky he was to have Michael Jordan? How lucky he was to have Scottie Pippen. How lucky he was to have Dennis Rodman. How about a Tony Kukoc? How about a John Paxson? A B.J. Armstrong? A Steve Kerr? How about that? When have you ever heard him talk about that? How about when he got Kobe? Now, in fairness to Phil, they didn't win when they had Shaq and Kobe until Phil got there. But at the same time, you won when you had them. And then Mitch Kupchak pulled off the heist of the century when he got to get rid of Kwame Brown.
Phil Jackson
to get Pau Gasol. I mean, come on.
Phil Jackson may be a bully.
Nobody ever says this about him.
Phil Jackson may be a bully. I don't see how it comes out in this respect. I mean, he knows the triangle better than anyone. And when he says, I'll take his word for it, that Carmelo's holding the ball too long to be less than optimally effective in the triangle. Now, Carmelo should be able to run the triangle. He can score from the perimeter. He can post up. He can get his teammates open looks and all those kind of things that Phil Jackson wants him to do. But if Phil says he's holding the ball too long, fine. Because Carmelo's not on his best day as good as Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan. In fact, he's not as good as Scottie Pippen or Shaquille O'Neal. He's not as good as any of those top flight guys that Phil Jackson's had in the past. There's an argument between Pau Gasol at his best and Carmelo Anthony. I got news. The point is, of everyone I just mentioned,
That's ridiculous.
the only one to have a championship without Phil Jackson, the only one is Shaq. And he got 1. He got it with Dwayne Wade, who had the greatest finals of anyone since Michael Jordan had among his great finals. So with another top 3 or 4 player in the league who went bananas in the finals, Shaq got 1. Kobe never sniffed another championship without Phil. Neither did MJ before or after. Neither did Pippen in spite of playing when he still had something left on good teams.
There you go.
Neither did Gasol. I mean, so Phil Jackson has something to do with that.
Yeah, who said he didn't? I mean, what am I talking gibberish here? Who said that Phil Jackson deserves no credit?
Did I say that?
No. Excuse me. What coach had the players he had? And by the way, let's talk about Greg Popovich, for example. Greg Popovich don't even want to do interviews. He's mad he's got to talk at halftime. He's mad he's got to talk during the games, okay? He barely wants to talk to the media on a day-to-day basis. When the man gets Coach of the Year, the players have to come out and get him to hoist the trophy. And when he has the trophy, they run away because he tries to give it to somebody else because he wants no credit. But Phil's sitting down with everybody from Charlie Rose to ESPN and everybody else and he never ever talks about all the other guys and what they did for him.
He does sometimes. Sure he does. But if you want to get down on Phil Jackson for something, you should be down on the fact that he's so insistent upon a culture of the triangle as the basis for his offense. I mean, Greg Popovich uses a little triangle sometimes.
Yeah,
it doesn't work in today's game.
That's the thing to be down on Phil Jackson about.
No, what I'm down on him about is that he's so quick to get on other folks. This is his 3rd year here. Is Melo the reason he walked into this season with a 49-115 record in his 2-year tenure, or that he couldn't build a bench? Is Melo the reason for that? Phil Jackson, is Melo the reason that the man has been on 2 road trips and they were LA, the Clippers and the Lakers games last year? Is that Melo's fault?
But is it Melo's fault
that this guy can't seem to assemble? I understand that. But listen, we all know that. Allen Iverson held the damn ball too. It didn't stop Larry Brown from getting him to the finals because you built the team around him. What has Phil Jackson done? All I'm saying to you is this. I respect the man as a great coach. He's an 11-time champion. But the arrogance and the willingness to bully people when you always talking about what they do instead of what you don't do. Phil Jackson is a great coach. He is a novice as an executive. He is a novice as a leader for the Knicks franchise.
13-time champion, too, as a player. But yeah.
That is a fact.
We got to move on.
Okay, I said 11 as a coach. I said coach.
Denying what Larry Bird has done. And we want to say happy birthday to Larry Legend. The former Celtic great turned 60 today. Bird was a 3-time league MVP, 2-time finals MVP, and 12-time All-Star. It got us thinking in our morning meeting, will we ever see another white superstar on Bird's level, Max?
Yeah, of course we will. I mean, listen, you take just North American Caucasian players like Steve Nash and John Stockton, not quite on Bird's level because they're shorter, but they were some of the best point guards of their generation. Of course, we will see other, American Caucasian, I suppose, European American superstars. Eventually, we'll see more than one, Stephen A. Smith.
I'm not so sure. I mean, I definitely think that we'll see European stars of lighter pigmentation. But when you talk about the United States of America and the options that you have available to you, I mean, the fact of the matter is this brother's on every street corner. I mean, every park, balling out. And a lot of times when you see white American players, yeah, they can play. There's no doubt about it. But in terms of that want to, meaning wanting to go for it, there are so many options available to a white male individual in the United States of America. There are times that I question. We got better options. We got baseball. We got football. We got all of this.
Yeah, but you know what,
stuff.
Stephen A. Smith?
I'm not one.
The NBA, the NBA is such an appealing place to work. It's not full contact like football, guaranteed contracts, lots of money, fun to play. That if you can, it's almost not an exaggeration to say the following. Everyone in the world, basically, who can play in the NBA does play in the NBA, and it selects out for height.
Let me make you laugh. Let me make you laugh with what I'm really, really trying to say. It's not intentional, and it's not insidious in any way. It's all in fun and love, but it's almost like reverse discrimination in the United States of America. It's like we got the black dudes, we got the Europeans, okay? Like the white dudes from America, they got a harder way to go to
Are
get
you saying that the NBA is missing?
And to really make some noise. It's hilarious.
Are you saying the NBA is missing a good old-fashioned North American white dude in the league? Is that what you're saying?
You know what? Yes, I am. I really, really believe that let me tell you something. If you can find Larry Bird, a white American superstar, it would be special. I think the league would love it. I think everybody would love it. I just think it's kind of harder to find. There's so many options.
All right. Lots of options. We got some white American superstars in football. We're going to get into them next. ESPN Power Rankings are out. The Raiders are ranked 3rd in the latest ranking, but should they be higher? We'll discuss. The ESPN Week 14 NFL Power Rankings are hot off the press, and Stephen A's favorite team remains on top. But behind the Cowboys, the Gronkless Patriots moved up 1 spot to number 2 after a win over the Rams, and the Raiders dropped 1 spot to number 3 after their comeback win against the Bills. Both New England and Oakland are 10-2 this season. Max,
yes.
Do the Raiders deserve to be above the Patriots?
No, they don't. Look, some of this is, anticipating the trajectory of the teams and Gronk goes down and all this. I get the arguments, but the Patriots are a 2-loss team that has been for most of this season until recently really perceived as the juggernaut of the NFL. It was going to be the Patriots in the AFC, and could the Cowboys keep this up, or would it be the Seahawks? And the Broncos kind of lost their way. They got banged up in the secondary, but the Patriots were the team. Molly, you, and others were telling me all year, look at Tom Brady. He's having the greatest season ever.
That was me.
Now, they're down Gronk, and they're not looking as good as they did earlier in the season. They're still a 2-loss team based on the resume and everything we know about the teams at this very moment, not just anticipating what may happen in the next few weeks, but right now, the Patriots should be ranked ahead of the Raiders.
Obviously, you're wrong. I disagree with you, but what else is new? it's one of those situations where you look at the New England Patriots right now, the absence of Gronk obviously is going to have, obviously could have a detrimental effect on them. Will they get it together? Sure. They find ways to win, but it's one thing to find ways to win. It's another thing to be and appear to be such a juggernaut that everybody's hearing your footsteps and they fear that you're coming. The Patriots are at the top of the heap in everybody's eyes with folks coming along the way. But Oakland is not tippy-toeing. They're stomping. With Derek Carr leading the way with this passing attack that's a top 3 in the game, with an offense that's a top 4 in the game, and more importantly, with their comeback abilities and their willingness and ability to win on the road, I think right now, in terms of a momentum, you've got to look at the New England Patriots and say to yourself, nope, they got to play second fiddle to the Oakland Raiders right now, because New England, they've got a bend but don't break defense. They'll find a way to get things done, but at the same time, it's one of those situations where their defense is not elite. It's not stout. And with going against Oakland's offense, which is on, and with their defense being on the come up, I think the fact that you've seen Khalil Mack really take the bull by the horn and really starting to do his thing, combined with Bruce Irvin and the rest of the crew and what the offense has been able to do in terms of coming back from early deficits, I just think Oakland has the edge right now. I consider the Oakland Raiders to be the #1 team in the AFC at this moment.
This used to be in boxing years and years ago, in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s. There was a big argument about who was the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world, Stephen A. I'm sure you remember Pernell Whitaker or Julio Cesar Chavez, right? And Chavez would overcome all these early obstacles and deficits in the fight and come back and knock people out. And they didn't know if Pernell could do that. You know why? Because he was just winning every fight by a lot. And no one could really put an obstacle in front of him. And given the choice between those two, I'll take just the better option. The Patriots don't have to mount fourth-quarter comebacks because they are better in most facets of the game against most teams, most seasons, at most times of the year. And it's true now.
No. Question. Who won the Pernell Whitaker, Julio Cesar Chavez fight?
Pernell Whitaker, but they called it a draw?
No. I asked you who won.
I told you.
Didn't ask you what your feelings were.
My feelings were the only thing
did
that
not
counts,
win.
Stephen A.
It was a draw.
No.
It was a draw. So, wait a minute. Why was it a draw? Why was it a draw? It was a draw
Corruption?
because Julio Cesar Chavez, you understand, had that ability to find a way to finish you off. And what I'm saying to you is
Pernell
that what I'm
dominated the end
saying
of the
to you,
fight.
well, listen. Well, look, he dominated the end of that fight. I thought he should have won too. But I use the operative word should. But I'm using your analogy. I know you're trying to block me from speaking because you don't want me to educate you. But the point that I'm trying to make is that here's the deal. It was a draw because of the very analogy that you use. That puncher's chance, that ability to find a way to come back no matter what adverse circumstances are presented to him, made you sit there and say, we ain't giving him the loss, which is why I'm not giving Oakland a #2 slot. I think they're the #1 team in the AFC because somehow, some way, they keep finding ways, and I can't ignore that.
Well, the Oakland Raiders are better than I thought they'd be. Their defense is getting better. They have a quarterback. I made a boxing analogy because I made it the other day. Derek Carr is like a fighter built for, or the Raiders with Derek Carr as the quarterback, and those receivers are like a fighter in the old days built for 15 rounds, going to knock you out in the championship rounds, 13, 14, 15. But, they're coming from behind. They're in these tough games coming from behind. And the Patriots are not because they're just winning. Because they're better.
The problem with your argument is that most folks don't remember when boxing went 15 rounds.
Well, that's their problem, Stephen A. Smith. Wasn't it a great time?
We know. Far be it for us to get where you're coming from. 15 rounds. Right. How old were you and I when boxing was 15 rounds? How old were we,
I don't know. I was probably about 15 or something like that when it went to 12.
Okay,
yeah. But that's the Raiders. The Raiders are the great puncher who comes back in fights. And the Patriots are just, Floyd Mayweather or someone like that. They just dominate you the entire. They're just better.
Except they have offense too, unlike Floyd Mayweather. All right. Okay. We ready to move on, guys? Because there's a subject we really want to get into coming up after the break. Stephen A. with his final take. This is going to be good because he's going to tell us about where his issues with America's team really started. There is a story, folks, and I cannot wait to hear this. Stay tuned. It is the moment now I have been waiting for all show. We call it Final Take, a new segment we started this week where Max and Stephen A get to let loose on any subject of their choosing uninterrupted. Now, I know Stephen A very well, but let me tell you, he's a very private man, and I'm being told he's going to let us in a little bit on this one. Stephen A, it's all yours.
Even though I'm on the road, I'm going to read this, Molly, because I want to make sure that I get my words right.
You got it.
I'm going to read to y'all this letter that I wrote to the viewers here to reveal my relationship with the Cowboys. I could tell you her name doesn't matter, but that wouldn't be honest. The truth is, she was my first girl, my first love, and I'll never forget her for as long as I live. Normally, you can point to the beauty, hazel brown eyes, shoulder-length hair, the smile, the figure, the laughter, the good times. Unfortunately, though, here's what I remember most. That damn number 33 Cowboys jersey she always wore. The same jersey she was wearing when she dumped me. Now, don't get me wrong. As shocking as it may be to most of you, even I have had my heart broken. There's the college sweetheart that only existed in my dreams. The real college sweetheart who squashed my dreams. There's always my boys, Mark Turner, Billy Johnson, Pete Whitfield, and other cats all of y'all know, like AI and Denzel Washington, who reach out just to remind me of Cowboys lore and how ridiculous I look hating on these boys. But we all know you never ever forget your first love and the residue of painful memories she purposely chose to leave behind. Annually, I swear I've moved past all of this, of course, but the evidence proves otherwise. That I simply haven't. It's undeniable when you remember January 5th, 1985, the day after the Dallas Cowboys lost to the Los Angeles Rams in the playoffs. When you remember it like it was yesterday, recalling that you were dumped because Tony Dorsett rushed for only 58 yards in a playoff loss to the Los Angeles Rams, where the Cowboys didn't score a single point. It's undeniable because you still remember smiling at her, thinking about the evening to come, only to come crashing down to earth due to being dumped. All because she thought you were laughing at her Cowboys. Yeah, I moved on. Trust me, I'm good. But how can one forget that particular trial in their life? Especially when mama, your siblings, and even your boys never hesitate to remind you, all while laughing in your face, even after all these years.
5-5 with brown eyes, smile like the sunrise. Stephen A, listen, we've all had our heart broken, and it's all coming together for me now.
Stephen A, it serves you right for falling in love with a Cowboys fan. I'm sorry to tell you. That's what you get. She was a succubus, Stephen.
I tried to learn my lesson.
She was a negative influence.
I bet she wished she had a chance with you now.
I've fallen victim to Cowboy fans before. No, yeah, I'm sure she wishes she had a chance with me now.
Look at me now.
No can do. I'm over it.
Fall in love with a Cowboys fan. You deserve all the misery that you've gotten from this, Stephen A. I have to tell you. That's out of the question.
The Cowboys have been the bane of my existence for over 30 years. I despise their fans. I always will.
She sounds terrible.
And I will never
The most I've ever
change
seen you in your feelings, and I love it.
Goodbye.